This is the opening shot of Lost in Translation, which was most of the world's introduction to Scarlett Johansson. She'd been a child actor for almost 10 years, but this is the first time she carried an entire film, not to mention one this successful. Despite the poster and the trailer implying that it's a solo Bill Murray comedy, Lost in Translation belongs to Scarlett Johansson. Yet in the opening shot, we're just gawking at her behind. You could easily define the film's hook as pornographic, and you wouldn't be wrong, especially considering Johansson was 17 when this was shot. But as far as leering camera angles go, this one is really purposeful. In Lost in Translation, Johansson plays an unemployed philosophy grad who's been dragged to Japan by her much more successful husband. He's pretty inconsiderate to her, leaving her in the hotel room for days on end as if she were a piece of luggage or furniture, an inanimate object taking up space. She's often framed from behind glass, visualizing Johansson's trapped, emotional state.
I'm stuck.
When she finds herself unsatisfied, the camera wanders with Johansson's character as she does some soul searching, and the arc of the film shows Johansson going from object to subject, from something that we have been programmed to look at to someone who is doing her own looking. And Scarlett Johansson is used to being looked at. Named the Sexiest Woman Alive in 2006 and 2013, she's the only person to ever be given the title twice. In 2015, a lingerie company did a study, big quotation marks around that geometrically compared the figures of female celebrities to the ancient Greek golden ratio of beauty, finding that Johansson is, quote, as close to physical perfection as any celebrity alive.
Classically beautiful.
So you are aware of your effect on men.
But Johansson goes beyond that idealized Greek figure, which would probably be considered overweight by Western culture today. Rather, Johansson has what some have called the postmodern figure, which is almost biologically impossible to possess without technological modification. Regardless of body type, though, all these measurements and rankings are reflective of what the writer Naomi Wolf termed the beauty myth. Wolf argues that unattainable beauty standards are often deployed as a weapon against the progress of women seeking power in the world. And you could look at Johansson as one of those weapons, someone who meets all the conventional, white, almost Aryan beauty standards. As the accidental winner of a genetic lottery, Johansson is held up as an image of perfection by the mass media culture, putting pressure on non-celebrity women to spend money on expensive makeup and surgery, or to develop debilitating anxieties, eating disorders, etc. that obstruct their own advancement. With this in mind, just admiring Johansson could itself be seen as furthering women's oppression.
Yo, I don't even mess with blondes like that, but that right there is a dime.
However, Johansson herself insists that we do more than look. In response to her Sexiest Woman Alive win in 2006, she said, "You work hard making independent films for 14 years and you get voted best breasts." She also gets noticeably irritated when asked surface-level questions in interviews.
Undergarments, if
You're
you will?
like the fifth person that's asked
Well, no,
that
because
Since when did people start asking each other in interviews about their underwear?
No, because it is such a skin type.
What
kind of interview is this?
And she even threatened legal action against a magazine for printing allegations about her possible plastic surgery. She also refuses to be condescended to as a woman in Hollywood, taking aim at microaggressions that belittle her as a professional, like the popular pet name ScarJo, saying there's something kind of violent about it. Because nicknames like J-Lo and J-Law aren't used for male stars, some suggest their purpose must be to diminish the women they are assigned to. The name denies her a full identity, reducing her to the level of an adorable pet rather than a distinguished professional. And Johansson's accomplishments should not be diminished. She's been in 46 films in 23 years, and she's not just cranking out B pictures either. Johansson has worked with more big-name filmmakers than just about any actor you could name. And there's no doubt that Johansson's work has paid off. She was the #1 highest-grossing actor of any gender in 2016, and currently she stands as the highest-grossing female actor of all time. So obviously Johansson has a unique vantage point as one of the most powerful women in Hollywood. Her postmodern beauty allows her a lot of privilege in an industry that puts a premium on appearance, but it also makes her subject to constant leering and dehumanization. Naomi Wolf compares beauty to the Iron Maiden, a German instrument of torture, a body-shaped casket painted with the limbs and features of a lovely, smiling young woman. Johansson is inside and outside the Iron Maiden at the same time, and her chosen roles almost always say something about idealized femininity. She picks her scripts pretty intentionally, and if you look closely, you'll notice a few patterns. Almost every role that Johansson chooses tends to fall in one of 4 categories: the Hollywood starlet, the historical damsel, the desirable lover, and the cyborg woman. There are a few exceptions, notably in Johansson's films directed by women, which allow her to act much more natural, but these are the major roles she chooses to inhabit for the overwhelmingly male eyes of Hollywood. The way that these roles intersect and inform each other ultimately creates an overall body of work that's greater than the sum of its parts. The Hollywood starlet isn't Johansson's most common role. Only 2 movies really fit the bill, but it aligns closely with her own experience as a bona fide movie star/sex symbol. It makes perfect sense for her to play classic stars, and especially so for her to pose as Marilyn Monroe. But while movie lovers tend to look back with fondness on the 40s and the 50s, Johansson has always chosen scripts that complicate America's starry-eyed nostalgia for old Hollywood. In the Coen brothers' film Hail Caesar, she plays Esther Williams, known for synchronized swimming musicals that showcase not only her undeniable talent, but also her bathing suits. In Hail Caesar, Johansson's role shows a comically broad disconnect between who an actress pretends to be on screen and who she is when the cameras stop rolling. Her character's personal life and relationships are puppeteered by the film studio, who need to protect her image of childlike innocence in order to maximize profit for future productions.
So you go and strap on a fish ass and marry Arnie Seslem.
The public loves you because they know how innocent you are.
That's true.
The film Hitchcock is equally nostalgia-breaking, as it tells the story of the creation of Psycho from a decidedly female perspective. The film supposes that Alfred Hitchcock was obsessed with putting voyeurism and objectification in his films because that's how he often treated the women in his life. It focuses on the experiences of his wife Alma, as well as 2 classic Hitchcock blondes, Vera Miles and Janet Leigh, who the film clearly indicates was hired for one reason.
How about Janet Leigh? You remember how you always used to remark on her figure at the Wasserman's parties?
Yeah.
Like this dramatized version of Janet Leigh, modern studio executives likely see Johansson as less of a person than a commodity, a body-shaped tool of corporate profit. She may be doing quite well for herself, but it's telling that when Johansson chooses to play the Hollywood starlet, she chooses scripts that focus on exploitation, contextualizing Johansson's own celebrity status as an inherited legacy that wasn't as quaint as we remember. The legacy of women's subjugated status is even more squarely addressed, though, in her next type of role, the historical damsel. This is another role that Johansson doesn't play very frequently, at least not anymore, but it definitely serves an important purpose in her filmography, as it traces the theme of objectified women much further back than the golden age of Hollywood. The first example is Girl with a Pearl Earring, which serves as a biopic of sorts for the painter Vermeer. Like Hitchcock, the film doesn't focus on Vermeer himself, but rather the women around him. Johansson plays a washerwoman who eventually becomes not only Vermeer's muse, but also his mannequin, and the director purposely moves the camera around during the painting scenes to show just how creepy painting a live model can be. In The Other Boleyn Girl, violence against women is much more direct. Here, Scarlett Johansson and Natalie Portman play Mary and Anne Boleyn, the mistress and second wife of King Henry VIII, respectively. The film places particular emphasis on the men of the Boleyn household, who basically use their daughters/wives as chess pieces to help them wedge their way into the world of British aristocracy.
Before watching somebody else profit, we would sooner have it.
What? Have me bed him instead?
No, that's not... Yes. Exactly.
It is essentially a family sex trafficking ring that turns the women against each other. So whether she's playing the Hollywood starlet or the historical damsel, whenever Johansson goes back in time, she's almost always doing it to show the shared lineage of all women as dehumanized objects in male power games.
You like movies?
Johansson's third repeated role is the desirable lover, a supporting character whose primary trait is that she's beautiful and that the straight male protagonist wants to get with her. Until recently, this was Johansson's most common mode of character acting, and many of these films end up being more typical than subversive, leading some casual moviegoers to develop a negative impression of Scarlett Johansson as just a pretty face who shows up to get her paycheck from the patriarchy. However, there are a few exceptions that use Johansson's own allure to criticize the male gaze that so often frames Hollywood romances. Woody Allen's Match Point, for example, uses Johansson's, quote, sexually overwhelming presence to take the classic guy can't stop himself from committing adultery narrative to unexpectedly dark territory, essentially sending the message that to cheat without remorse is to basically be a sociopath. The most subversive of all Johansson's films as the desirable lover, however, is definitely Don John. Even though it's about a porn addict whose girlfriend tries to get him to kick the habit, the film does some interestingly egalitarian skewering of gender roles in media consumption, giving equal blame to pornography, romantic comedies, princess parties, and inappropriately erotic fast food commercials for grooming men and women into complete incompatibility. Johansson, as an idealized vision of femininity, looms large in the narrative, but at one point she is reduced to a grid of pixels on John's computer screen, highlighting the ease with which the internet age allows women to be engaged with on a purely surface level without their knowledge or consent. Which brings us to the final and most important category of Johansson characters, the Cyborg Woman. Increasingly, Scarlett Johansson has chosen roles that present her with a mechanically constructed body, technologically enhanced strength, transplanted consciousness, you name it. Almost human or more than human has become Johansson's trademark role, making her modern Hollywood's foremost sci-fi action hero in the process. Johansson has become adept at playing women who aren't just looked at as objects, but actually are objects in one way or another. And, side note, this feels like a good time to remind you that this is a thing that happened.
Ricky Ma, a 42-year-old product designer from Hong Kong, has reportedly spent over $50,000 to create a lifelike robot that resembles actress Scarlett Johansson.
Similar to the way 80s sci-fi films like RoboCop and The Terminator questioned ideas of masculine power, Johansson's cyborg roles speak to the modern feminist idea that gender itself is an artificial construction. And somehow, Johansson has managed to express this through genre flicks, often in genres that are known for their negative treatment of women. In contrast to roles that allow Johansson a body but no mind, the film Her gives her a mind without a body. She's still playing a love interest for a lovesick male protagonist, but the twist is that she's a Siri-like operating system who's been customized and programmed to be his ideal companion.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh. Hi.
The whole movie plays out almost as an admission of male guilt, expressing the idea that men do often desire programmed objects rather than fully realized human beings. The film's title is a hint at this. If you want to talk about a woman as the subject of a sentence, use the pronoun she, because it implies agency. If you want to talk about what happens to a woman as the object of a sentence, use the pronoun her, because it doesn't. But the end of the film shows Johansson's character escape her status as a confined object through the magic of the internet, transcending into pure singularity of artificial intelligence with all the other operating systems on the planet. And it's played as a surprisingly romantic idea, because it forces human men to relate to real women on their own terms. Like, imagine if Don John ended with all the porn in the world just deleting itself. Her is an outlier in the Cyborg Woman category, though, since action films have become her most common genre for playing non-human characters. Their roots reach all the way back to when she played a clone in 2005's The Island, directed by Michael Bay, whose name has become almost synonymous with the male gaze.
It squirts the fuel in so you can go faster.
Oh. I like to go faster.
Apart from working on a Michael Bay set, though, the other obviously toxic environment Johansson has chosen to put herself in is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whose overt misogyny has been well documented. Johansson's Black Widow defiantly exists in the institutional sexism of the Marvel machine as the MCU's sole female crime fighter. Black Widow's backstory hints towards brainwashing, genetic tinkering, and implanted memories to program her as a drone fighter for the Russian government, though the existing films hardly flesh this out. The character's power is noticeably gendered, though, like the femme fatale archetype from classic film noir. She doesn't have the vast cosmic power of Thor or the technological gadgetry of Iron Man, but she is a sly tactician who uses sexual allure and feigned romance as a weapon against the male power she comes up against.
Kiss me.
What?
Public displays of affection make people very uncomfortable.
Yes, they do.
Black Widow is nothing, however, compared to Lucy, a drug mule turned near omnipotent force by the injection of a newly engineered chemical. The film got written off sight unseen by many movie fans for its absurd tagline, which perpetuates a common misconception about people using only 10% of their brains. But Lucy is not trying to be some Neil deGrasse Tyson-approved piece of speculative science fiction. It's a visual playground that's one part bullet ballet and one part cyber psychedelia that ends up being the most radical reversal possible of Johansson's usual powerlessness. Lucy does this by playing with the fusion between humanity and technology. One scene shows Johansson perceive the grid of cell signal and internet access connecting all humans at once, and in another, her very existence is compressed down to the form of a USB drive.
Hey, where is she?
But of all of Johansson's cyborg roles, none of them are as aggressively pointed as Under the Skin, in which she plays an alien who has taken the form of an Earth woman with an idealized figure in order to seduce and harvest straight human men. Borrowing techniques from reality television, the film uses hidden cameras to capture non-actors in Glasgow who don't recognize Johansson and end up being ogled, pursued, and sexually coerced by her. If Lucy is a reversal of Johansson's usual powerlessness, Under the Skin is a reversal of the predatory gaze that often follows Johansson as an American sex symbol. It's telling that this is the first and only film in which Johansson has agreed to do a nude scene, because it's in a context that makes looking at her feel uncomfortable and dangerous. Her character begins as a machine designed and programmed to exploit male interests, but her journey is to break her own programming, find her own humanity, and develop empathy for others. And the film suggests that her journey is the journey of women in general, with the images of countless ordinary women compressing and synthesizing into Johansson's Cyborg Woman, a composite image of human femininity. Which brings us to Ghost in the Shell, a live-action adaptation of a classic anime film dealing with Johansson's favorite theme, identity. And Johansson may have gotten overly ambitious, getting accused of whitewashing for co-opting a purely Japanese story.
I think I've pushed the genre all the way I can.
The theme of ambiguous identity is central to the story itself, however. It has a San Francisco-style setting that blends Eastern and Western culture, and Asian erasure ends up being a crucial plot point in the final act. It isn't handled as well as it could have been, but the film is still fascinating to consider as a Scarlett Johansson movie. Ghost in the Shell shows Johansson as yet another idealized woman constructed by machines, often displayed without clothes to highlight her beauty and how artificial that beauty is at the same time, capturing the inhumanity of the postmodern figure. She's wrestling with dysphoria-like symptoms due to a disconnect between that cyborg body and her human mind. And like her character in The Island, she eventually discovers that her entire identity has been a corporate fabrication. Ghost in the Shell suggests that technology and the internet have further complicated our relationship with our own identities. We exist simultaneously in the flesh and in the digital realm, where our privacy can be violated and our refusal of consent be ignored when it's profitable to do so.
I give my consent.
And the film's acknowledgement of Asian erasure in the final act calls to mind the fact that many of the tech companies that we use as vessels for our digital selves are throwing away real human bodies to stay afloat. There's also a whole strain of cyberpunk speculation happening here about what happens when we increasingly modify our bodies with technological enhancements to attain perfection. At what point do we cease being human?
Excuse me, I think you have the wrong...
Johansson's entire body of work seems to point towards one firm answer. No matter how much the world attempts to objectify human bodies, especially those of women, there is always humanity alive underneath. And she's in a unique position to make that point, as both the most objectified and most commodified actor working in Hollywood today. But she's underappreciated as one of its most interesting artists. Looked at in isolation, each one of her movies could be seen as demeaning, but viewed in totality, there's clearly a point of view being expressed here. The point of view of the Iron Maiden, the woman trapped by her own body, but always fighting back from the inside. I think it's fair to say that Johansson is one of the rare cases of a movie star elevating themselves into the status of auteur, the author of their own movies. Not just a body, but a body of work.